We have with us a guest, and we have I think something that has really been on my mind a lot to talk about. And so we're going to get into that, and we're going to spend the whole show doing it. But I want to introduce to you Debbie Singh, who is with Visiting Angels. She's a nurse and the owner. So good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I've really been looking forward to this. When you talked about fall prevention, I just went, wow, this is cool, because it's one of those things that we've got on our list. But before we get there, what I want to do is talk about Visiting Angels. You guys are a great company that you've purchased, I guess, a couple of years ago. And tell us kind of how that got started.
Well, I grew up in the Central Valley,
Okay.
and I did live out of state for several years, and that's actually where I practiced nursing. And as we were moving back to California, I was sort of in that deciding phase. You know, do I keep doing what I'm doing, working on the floor as a nurse, or do I try something different? And that's when I found out about Visiting Angels. And even as a nurse myself, I wasn't even fully aware of home care and this being an option for people. You know,
Okay.
I always took care of people on the back end
Yeah.
of it after
Yeah,
something
really, huh?
happened, you know, after the hip fracture and after there were complications related to an injury.
Sure.
And so when I saw the premise with this, especially being that it's one-on-one care, being a care provider myself, I know
Because you
that
definitely didn't have one-on-one care at the hospital.
no, no. And if anyone's ever done that, you know, it's hard work. It really is. And as well intentioned as, you know, a care provider is going to be, when you're one person dividing amongst several, you know, it's someone's going to be, you know,
Someone's
with
gotta- yeah.
less of you. And with one-on-one care, you have someone who's there, who's devoted to you and what your needs are. And so they can take their time. They don't have to rush. And that was actually probably one of the first things that attracted me to Visiting
Really?
Angels.
Uh-huh.
And then when I really started looking at it, because it's non-medical care, and I'm a nurse, and so it's kind of the flip side of things. But this is a preventative, and that's sort of how I saw it as,
Okay.
you know, versus having to watch someone go down that, you know, spiral after complications arise from injuries, which they commonly do. Especially, I always mention the hip fractures, because those are the ones that can really get somebody. You know, is there a way that we can keep that from happening in the first place and keep people safe at home?
You know what? And I don't want to interrupt you, but,
Yeah.
but you're bringing up something that I think doesn't really get talked about, because people, you know, have issues like, well, I don't want somebody in my home, or no, I can care for them, you know, because we've been together for, you know, 100 years and it's just my job. But what you just mentioned, I think, is really important to bring out, that, you know, this is, in a best case situation, perhaps a way to help prevent some of the things that do happen, you know, and we're going to get into that after the break. But I just kind of threw up a little note in my mind. It's like, yeah, you know what, that needs to be said more and more, because having somebody there that's observing and watching and helping obviously is much better than, you know, just as you can kind of a thing, right? And I know that, you know, there's that cycle with, well, we're at home and then we had a fall or stroke or medical episode, or, you know, whatever. Went to the hospital, went to therapy, went back home, had another episode, went to the hospital, went to therapy, went back home. It's this cycle that people are in. So if they would do some type of in-home care prior, before they really think they need it, I think people would probably see a reduction in those incidents, maybe? Is that
definitely
reasonable to say?
And, you know, amongst healthcare providers, you know, we have a term for, we call them our frequent flyers.
Yeah.
And those are the ones those
Yeah.
are people that we know. You know, I commonly would go in, and when you go in to get report, it's this name, and you say, I know that name, and you go in there, and it's like, oh, you know,
Yeah,
you're back. And a lot of times it was because there wasn't a fully effective plan that was in place when they were being discharged. And discharge planners, you know, they do their best to make sure that something's going to be there, but of course it has to be something that the family and our care recipients are willing to follow through with.
Sure.
But it is important to have a plan. If, you know, if you're in a situation where you've already you're in the hospital, you're going through rehab. Now you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to prevent myself from falling into that revolving door of the hospital, and what can I do at home to stay at home? And that's part of what we do too. My goal is, when you get discharged home, how can we keep you there? But also, how do we keep you from getting in there in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of what you just said too, where it's getting something in place before it is absolutely 100% needed. And that's where it acts as that preventative, sort of like an insurance plan. You have someone who's there to help you with those little things.
It's not like you want to use it, you know. It's like you have homeowners and you have fire insurance and car insurance. It's not like you're really, you know, excited to use them, but it gives you peace of mind to know that you've got it. And I would imagine, and you're the nurse here, not me, but I would imagine most care plans are only developed once there's been an issue.
Commonly, that's when I get a call. I usually get a call, and families are sort of frantic. You know, I have my mother. They're going to be discharging her in a couple of days, but they're telling her she can't go home by herself. You know, we're having to either look at skilled nursing or assisted living, or but she wants to stay home. How do we do that? And then that's where we sort of get into it. And
it's not easy, is it? Because it involves, you know, it involves not only a medical plan, but it involves financial consideration, obviously. And then you have the logistics of all of it, you know. Is somebody available to come home, or is our only option, you know, to have somebody like you? Is home health care an option? Do they have to go to therapy first? And, you know, most people, when they call you, probably, if it's like me, it's their first time going through it, and they just are overwhelmed. So
it is. When people call us, it's definitely, you know, and I joke with people that, you know, no one ever calls home care. They don't wake up in the morning and think, I'm just going to call a home care company, just because. And so it's usually because something happened, something is happening. A family member is concerned about a loved one. They're seeing things that, you know, they're losing weight. There are just certain behaviors that they're seeing that they're changing, and so that's where the concern arises. So there's always a trigger of some sort that's going to happen that's going to lead to the phone call, and that's where we try to dive in there to find out, okay, what are the concerns? Because our care plans are going to be customized to each person, because everyone's family dynamics are different, everyone's needs are different, and it changes. Just like how we mentioned, you know, having something in place before it's absolutely needed is smart. Just this last flu season, this last winter, that was really hard on a lot of people, particularly our seniors. So for some people, what we did during that time, if they were really not feeling well or trying to bounce back, was we increased care. And it was so easy to do because they were already with us and we were already providing care. So we would just increase it. As they started to feel better, we just kind of pulled back, and then we went back to doing what we were doing. But the way I feel is that kept them from having to potentially fall into that next step of now you can't be at home because we didn't take good care of you initially. Yeah,
that's really good. So we're visiting with Debbie Singh, who is an RN, and she is the chief cook and bottle washer for Visiting Angels, right? But you guys do some things that are different and unique. You're not just a, you know, one little company that's local, which is, you know, we all need great local companies. We support them very, very much. But you have a presentation that you do at no cost about fall prevention, among other things. And so I want to ask you to share that with our viewers. We're going to take a quick break, though. We're visiting with Debbie Singh with Visiting Angels, and you're going to hear a lot, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey guys, we're back with Truth for Seniors, the place where you get the most up-to-date and accurate information. And we are visiting with Debbie Singh, who is the owner of Visiting Angels. She's also an RN, and I have begged her to share with us some things. She's graciously agreed to do that. When it comes to fall prevention, it's a big thing that we all know about. Most of our senior clients are afraid of. They go to great lengths not to fall. They're worried about it constantly. I can say this because my mother-in-law doesn't watch the show, but My mother-in-law has fallen several times, just like out and about, going shopping or going, and it's with my father-in-law holding her arm, and she's still, it's like, oh my gosh, man, and thank God she hasn't broken anything, too severe, but I mean, some people, it seems like everybody's afraid of it, but some people are like deathly afraid of it. And it seems like we were just sharing before we got back on the air that it seems to me anyways that when people are elderly and they break a hip, the consequences are pretty severe. And I think people know that, and so that's why they're just so afraid. So share with us some of the things that you tell people when you are dealing with this, because I think it's one of the most important things you can educate people on.
Yeah, falls do have a significant impact on the person who fell as well as the family, because of what can occur after a fall. Only about 40% of people who fall and have a hip fracture actually even go back home. And
really?
And only about 40% and about 25% of those will actually fully recover, meaning the remaining are going to be dealing with something, some kind of change in their independence and their mobility as a result of that fall.
Wow.
And so it is quite significant, the impact that it has. And we want people to not necessarily be fearful of the fall, because that can also lead to our changing our habits and suddenly isolating ourselves and no longer going out and enjoying life. But we need to be aware of the fact that if we fall, what can happen as a result. And so there's things that we can do, but the first thing we need to do is, one, understand the impact of it, understand what those risk factors are, because once we know what those risk factors are, that will then allow us to identify what can we do, what are strategies we can put in place to prevent it from happening.
And I imagine, again, like your care plans, with each individual, it could be kind of specific, couldn't it? Because maybe somebody has an issue with balance, or so they have to be more aware of that, or they've got an issue with a bad hip or something. Or does that make sense? Or
yes, every care plan that we put together is going to be customized to that particular person and even that particular family. Because a lot of times we do have family members who are participating in care, and so we're working alongside them, and we're working on finding strategies that are going to work for them specifically. And it's also, I call it kind of, our care plan is sort of like a living document, because it changes as life changes. We change it as as it's needed. But yeah, understanding what those are, those risk factors, the impact of it. One hospital stay, and this was actually the latest data is back from 2014, is $30,000. Just for the hospital stay. And back in 2014, there were 7 million hospital visits that resulted in hospitalization related to a fall, just from a fall.
Seriously?
So, yeah. So
7 million? Holy moly!
Yeah. 1 in
Good
3
grief.
people over 65 will experience a fall. So
No kidding.
whether that results in an injury, it's sort of rolling the dice. Every time someone takes a tumble, they're rolling the dice on whether or not it's going to result in an injury or not. So we want to definitely take those measures to prevent it in the first place.
So where do most falls occur?
In the home. Actually, a lot of people think that as long as I'm at home and I don't go anywhere,
I'm
and
safe.
that's where people start to kind of isolate themselves, and they think that they're going to be okay. And that's actually where the majority of falls. It's about 55% of falls are actually taking place in the home, with another 22% taking place like near the home, like so outside the home. A lot of people do gardening. It's just sort of in their home environment.
That makes sense,
So you're looking at 77% of falls occurring where people feel the most safe in their own environment. And then the remaining 23 is going to be out and about, just like you mentioned, your mother-in-law. Curbs are a biggie. Those little parking little divider items
She's done
there.
both of those.
And so she's we get a lot of falls with those too. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be aware and cautious about those when they go out. They should. But they should always start looking at home first, because that's where the easiest place that we can modify things, and it's little things that we can do to make it a little bit safer. And the first step is identifying what can lead to the fall. And we sort of divide it up into two factors. You have your internal risk factors and your external. Your internal risk factors are going to be what's going on with you, particularly with your health. I always let people know that, especially as we get older, not drinking enough water in the day leads to dehydration really easily, and leads to dizziness and confusion, and then leads to a fall. There's a lot of ER visits that are solely for rehydrating people and then sending them back home. And so, and that's if there wasn't an injury, but it was just related to dehydration. Now, if there was an injury, it was as simple as make sure you're drinking enough water throughout your day. And there's little things too that we try to introduce for people with that.
Not to interrupt you, but one of the most amazing things I've seen through the years is the impact and the number of people who have UTIs. And then they have dementia, or severe memory loss, or they have balance issues. And it's kind of strange, but my wife's grandmother was in her 90s, and they moved her from Kansas to Washington to be near her family and they thought, oh my gosh, she finally lost it, because now she's got these memory issues, and she doesn't recognize people, blah blah blah. Well, make a long story short, she didn't have a new physician at the new state. They finally got her one after several weeks, and it's like, oh, that's just this. And then they cleared that up, and it's like, oh, we got grandma back again. Hey, and it's like she's like 94 or something at that point, and they thought, well, she finally lost it, the move was too much. But I've heard that over and over and over again, the things that people have to deal with as a result of that. And that's, obviously very treatable, and in some cases I think probably preventable. So
it is very treatable, and it's good actually that you bring that up, because especially when we're older, oftentimes the first sign that someone, I want to say 70, 80 years or older, our first sign of a UTI is actually confusion. It's not going to be a fever. A lot of times they might not be reporting a burning sensation or anything like that. It's going to be what we call an altered mental status, and that's usually where people will get admitted into the hospital because the family's saying they were fine, and sometimes they may attribute to, oh, well, because just because you're older doesn't mean you automatically have dementia.
I hope my kids remember that.
So remember that. But so we should question that. Is grandma or mom, is she acting different? And a lot of times it's as simple as a UTI that can be treated, and some people have what's called chronic UTI. And so that's something too that should be seen by a physician. That way they can stay on top of it, because it can become dangerous if it's left untreated. Even though it's a simple UTI, it can become a much more serious situation. But you also bring up a good thing too with more of the internal factors as well. Just being aware of certain disease processes. For example, someone with congestive heart failure may have a lot more higher likelihood for a fall, and asking yourself why. We tend to have swelling in our legs, especially if it's more advanced and progressed. That swelling in your legs makes it really heavy, and it makes it hard to walk. So you get people not picking up their feet and more shuffling, and when you're starting to shuffle, that's when you can have a fall. And there's more than one reason that someone can have a shuffle. If you have someone with Parkinson's, that's another internal factor, where they're having an inability or difficulty to coordinate their movements, and so they're shuffling.
Neuropathy as well, right? Because there's some pain, and so they're trying to be really.
Diabetic neuropathy is definitely one to be aware of as well, because as we lose that sensitivity and that sensation on the bottom of our feet, we can't judge things. I always use stairs as an example with that. We don't think about it, but years of going up and down stairs, particularly going downstairs, you gauge the edge of the step with your foot. We don't think about it because we're just doing it automatically. Now, if you diminish that sensitivity on there, you're more likely to misjudge where the edge of that step is and take a fall. And along the lines with diabetes as well, you have diabetic retinopathy, which is going to affect your vision. And for some people, they may even go completely blind, or just sort of slowly have it become more and more diminished. So being aware of your vision, do you need glasses? Keeping up with that with your ophthalmologist is really important, because you want to be aware of, am I not seeing that well? Because it happens gradually.
Yeah.
And so we don't notice. Actually, my husband recently he's wearing glasses now, and he didn't realize that his vision wasn't as sharp until when he looked, and he was thinking, over time, I wasn't seeing color as clearly. More things almost looked gray to him, is what he said. Certain colors.
It's funny. Just yesterday, my barber, who I only go to, you can imagine, about once a year, but he just had cataract surgery, and he joked and he said, "Yeah, I never knew the sky was blue." So we all laughed because we thought he was joking, right? He was dead serious. He's
he did.
I've not seen a blue sky, and I can't tell you how long. And then he had a successful surgery, but you don't think about those things. It's like the dementia, what do they call that, where they have the dementia where you put on the things on your hands and your eyes and your feet. It's the
where you can kind of live it in a way
dementia.
too. You kind of step into those shoes.
Oh my gosh, I could see how you could fall real easy if you were dealing with all those issues. It's like, man, I don't want to even get up. So you've got internal risk factors. What are some of the other ones that you got a whole list here, man?
There's a whole lot of them. I could probably go for quite a while on just that alone. Another important one too, actually, even being that we're talking about our head right now, our eyes and stuff, are our ears. Having vertigo and having hearing problems, hearing loss, can also lead to a fall as well. I get a lot of people with ringing in the ears, and believe it or not, it actually affects someone's ability to eat, to sleep. And so you start to see a decline in that regard too, and that weakness can lead to a fall.
Really?
Everything becomes a cascade effect, and when you start looking at all of these things, you start to see how they're interrelated. Our medications that we take to help treat a lot of these things.
I can definitely see that. That was one thing I had in my notes to ask you about, because good grief, we've got so many clients now that are on more than 10 meds every day. Which probably 3/4 of the meds that prescribed are to offset problems with the first ones that were given, right? Balance stuff out or whatever. And it's like, these poor people, some of them look like zombies. I mean, they just have no energy. They're lethargic. It's like they slow down everything, even their speech, and so that would make sense to me. So.
They say if you take more than 3 or 4 medications a day, that you significantly increase your risk for a fall. Because if you look at the majority of medications,
I would believe that,
a lot of medications, the side effects are dizziness and drowsiness.
Oh, good.
So when you start to compound them and stack them on top of each other, many people are on more than one blood pressure medication. Well, a big side effect of a blood pressure medication is going to make you dizzy, especially when you first stand up. And that's actually one thing that I also teach our clients too, is how to stand up correctly.
Don't do it quickly, right?
You don't. Yeah. Well, and then when you do, you don't want to also start walking right away either.
Okay.
So you want to stand up and you want to wait a few seconds and see how you feel.
Yeah.
If you feel dizzy, you're still right next to your seat and you could just sit right back down. Now, if you get up and start walking away right away, as you've probably been doing for many years, you may realize that about 4 steps out, suddenly you feel really wobbly, and now you're out in the open and there's nothing for you to hold on to, and that's where you can get a fall.
Wow.
So just being aware of that and always changing your levels from laying down to sitting to standing. You want to do that in steps and gauge it each time to see how you feel.
Wow. And this is amazing. And this is Debbie Singh with Visiting Angels. We're talking about fall prevention, and she's got just tons of good stuff. And so we're going to come back after a break and talk about some of the external risk factors if we can.
Yeah.
But this is Truth for Seniors, and we'll be right back. Anyway, so we're visiting with Debbie Singh, who is the owner of Visiting Angels, a local company, but a nationwide firm, right?
We are.
That provides all kinds of care. And we're talking about fall prevention, and she has just given us some amazing information. We want to jump right back into it. So we talked before the break about the internal factors, the risk factors that are going on inside of us. So let's talk about, if we can, the external ones.
So the external factors include, that's our environment,
Okay.
our home environment, around our home, and that's, when we go out. What can we notice and have our eyes open to? What can lead to a fall? Being aware of those things are going to help you prevent it from happening in the first place.
Sure.
And so looking at, little things, sometimes it's just small, tiny modifications that we do at home. A moment ago, you and I actually, during the break, we were talking about throw rugs. Those are a biggie, and those are things that can lead to a fall. So we tell people, if it's possible, to remove them or to put something under them to make them a little bit more
Non-slip,
secure.
yeah.
And we do have some people who are absolutely in love with their rug. And so we'll say, well, we could try taping it down, like
There
a
you
duct tape.
go,
It won't look beautiful, but at least your beloved rug will
Hey,
still be
man,
there.
My
But
wife has one that I almost lost it a while back, and I'm like, honey, there's nothing underneath that keeps it from
Yeah.
slipping, man. You're gonna kill me,
we're having it flip up a little
Jeez
bit on
Louise,
the edge.
yeah. I'm like, oh my God, I'm afraid of it. So
And that
Yeah.
one's one that a lot of people are aware of. That, when I go into
Okay.
homes and we talked about falls, one of the first things families will tell me is, "Oh yeah, well we've already removed the
Good.
rugs." There's more though than the rugs, and
Sure.
just being aware of it. Small things such as night lights. In the home, where we see a lot of falls too are at night when someone's getting up to go to the restroom. We're all already a little bit wobbly anyway when we're getting out of bed at night.
groggy.
So if you couple that with, maybe you just took a medication to help you sleep, or you just took some of your medications that are going to make you dizzy, and you have someone now who's already having difficulty getting
Sure.
around. So you start to add up all those things and think, well, no wonder you fell. It's
Exactly,
amazing you
yeah.
made it there and back,
Yeah.
On the days that you didn't fall.
We're setting ourselves up for failure, man.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And a simple nightlight can help make it a little bit safer. And that's because at night, and especially if you have someone who's older who's already having vision problems, cataracts, those kinds of things, you get a glare, it helps you judge edges better.
Okay.
A lot of people fall down because they accidentally hit their dresser, or they bumped into something that they didn't really see because they were trying to navigate in the dark. But by
Okay.
having some of those night lights in place, and you can have some really nice soft light ones, kind of for some people that bright light is an issue, it just helps illuminate those edges a little bit better, and it makes it easier for someone to make it to and from the restroom
Yeah, it's
safer.
interesting. My wife's mother lived with us my mother-in-law for 4.5 years, and so we were talking about that one night because there was a hallway between her rooms, and I said, it's like when you drive at night. I mean, if I'm driving, and there's not a car coming, I got my brights on. It just helps me see
yeah.
better, right? I mean, I said, we just need to give her some brights, man, just something in there, and I said, because we're all that way. But,
We're all that way, and then if you're a clumsy person, I know I'm a clumsy person, so I think I've already decided that once I hit 80, I'm just going to bubble wrap and, make myself a little bit safer.
There you
But
go.
just being aware of yourself, too. Are you the kind of person who bumps into things? Then if you are, then you want to take those steps. Other little things, too, are using step stools if you are going to use one. I always recommend for people to keep things at the level where they can reach it,
Sure,
and that's
yeah.
something that we do for a lot of our clients when we come out for our visits. Part of our care plan is make sure you leave some dishes and some cups and whatever it is
Really?
at the height, either at the first one tier
wouldn't have thought
or
about
right
that.
on the counter, so we'll kind of have a spot for those things, because
Okay.
sometimes we don't think about it, and we put something on the
wouldn't
top
have, yeah.
counter, and you're really tall, so you probably wouldn't even think about it.
Wouldn't even think about it.
But
yeah.
if it's on the top shelf,
Yeah.
someone like me who's not very tall, I'm going to need a step stool to
There
get
you
up
go.
there.
Yeah.
And I've come to a lot of people's homes, and they're using a chair, or on top of it a swivel chair that they're getting on top of to reach the cabinets or their
Are you guys
drapes.
crazy or
and
what?
so
Oh my
and-
gosh! Wow.
and so, and that's a lot of times their kiddos are saying, "Why are you doing that? Don't get up there that way." So, just making sure that you're using one, maybe that has a little handle. Like if you
Sure.
are going to use one, there's some now that have handles that you can use. On
Wow.
stairs, putting a little like tape or something reflective on steps just so that it makes it obvious that the level's about to change, and it kind of becomes that little marker for you too, that a level is going to change.
Don't you think too that part of it is, I think it was during the break we talked about this, where I've been in some homes, and they're beautiful homes, and obviously they're kept up very nice, and the people are very particular about everything in its place. But I think to do it right, you have to be willing to kind of let some of that go a little bit, so that you're focusing more on functionality as opposed to aesthetic beauty, because sometimes a metal bar in your shower doesn't look all that great, but it's sure nice when you need it, or you,
Exactly.
and I've had people kind of like, wow, yeah, but you got to do this and you got to do that. It's like, yeah, but look what we're talking about. Somebody's life here, somebody's health. And I think you kind of have to just be willing to it's about function right now, and
when you talk about a fall, you talk about what can happen after a fall. There's a great percentage. I think it's 20% of people after a hip fracture will pass away within that same year. So when you start looking at the shower, for example, where falls are hard, they're fast. It's very hard to especially if you don't have a grab bar to hold on to. You can see where it becomes almost a choice of life and death. Do you want your shower to look really pretty for really no one who's going to see it? I mean, I don't go to people's houses and look in their shower, or let's make this into a safer environment. The other thing I also recommend to people with the bars is because a lot of people, they don't want to have to screw them in because now it's permanent.
Well, now they have some suction kind, don't they?
Yeah, I don't recommend those because if you think about it, if any air gets in there, then that thing's going to come off. So you want to know that if I'm going to need this, and if I'm going to trust all my weight with this, then it better be something that's going to hold you. And a lot of times, if it's not bolted in there, that could just come right off. So as a temporary, get it done now, I tell people go ahead and use those. But if you're looking at something to be really sturdy, you want to get those ones that are screwed in there. Around the toilet too is another place. Just kind of everywhere. You want to have those. Anywhere where you find yourself, what I call wall walking, furniture walking. If you find yourself doing that, then you probably want to think about, one, you probably maybe need to introduce a walker in there, or a cane or something, but you also probably need to introduce some grab bars, especially in places where you're trying to sit down and get up and doing that sort of thing.
One of the neatest things, it's kind of off the subject a little bit, but one of my clients asked me to take their car back because husband drove and had an issue and had to leave their car, so she says, hey, would you go with me and bring the car back? And in this, right next to the seat was this handle, it's a metal handle. And I'm like, what the heck is that? So I put it away, and then I realized there's one in that door, and there's one in that door, and they were a handle, and you stick it in the, have you seen those?
I don't think I have.
To help you get out of the car. It's like a big sturdy handle, it's metal with a rubber grip, and you stick it in the door jamb itself. There's where your door locks, you stick it in there, and you can help you get out of the car.
I love it.
It's really cool, and they're dirt cheap. Found them on Amazon and got them for different ones, but yeah, just another little helpful device that helps you, because a lot of older people have a hard time standing up, right? And especially if they've been driving for any length of time, and you can't have somebody help you rock out of your car, right? It's
it becomes
not quite
trickier.
Exactly.
And some people don't go anywhere because of that. Oh, well, it's just too difficult to get in and out of the car, so I don't go anywhere. And that's that factor that you really need to start to watch out for. Are you starting to do things that are causing you to change your life and not enjoy your life anymore, simply because getting around is becoming a little bit more of a challenge? There's so many things that they're always coming out with something new and introducing something that's a little bit better, and has just higher functionality that you can use just for the game. I'm gonna go and look that up, and
and you know what, Ron and I were doing this the other day. He was looking at something, and we were looking for a gift for one of the groups that we support, to have a raffle. And he looked up, we were talking, we had the owner of Ray Fisher Pharmacy on the show a couple weeks ago. He was talking about the different ones, the different walkers and what's covered by Medicare and all the ones that aren't. but they're really not that much more, and they're so much nicer. And so Ron found one at I won't say the name of the store, but you know, a discount tool store, and it was a walker. It's the same kind, probably just made overseas. It was like $75. I'm like, shoot, man. I mean, you know, we ought to get one in every house if that's the price. Jeez, people could use them. But so you're dealing with something. I don't want to get you off your thought process here, but when you introduce some of this stuff, I've found one of the things that you're probably dealing with too is a little bit of pride.
It is hard for people to accept needing the need for a walker or for any kind of assistive device, really, because they see it as, well, now once I start using this, I'm old, or you know, or I'm no longer capable. You know, when we think of a cane and a walker, it almost becomes that symbol of someone who's who's getting older, and you know, and this is what I didn't want this, and or I get that hearing aids a lot, especially with gentlemen. The hearing aid thing is a big pride thing, but so introducing things, you definitely want to do them gently. On the walker side, actually, one thing that I recommend, especially for families who have a loved one who has dementia, that you want to introduce it early before they really, really need it, because as dementia progresses, the need will eventually be there for the walker, and if you haven't introduced it before, you haven't created a muscle memory for them, they're not going to know how to use it. You can't teach somebody with advanced dementia how to use a walker. They're not going to know what to do with it, because eventually you get to the point where you don't recognize things, and so they're not going to understand how to use it, and it'll almost become actually a falling hazard for them, really, if they haven't practiced with it beforehand. So you want to do it early and just say, you know, we're just doing this as a practice, just to kind of get you used to it. That way, if you ever need it, you're already familiar with it, because it does take practice to walk with it. So
some of these people, I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a fall waiting to happen, man, you know. And I guess you're supposed to walk, you know, kind of like in it, but a lot of people, it's like way out here.
It's extended, or they set it out way out there, so for them to get to it, they're throwing themselves completely off center, and that's where they keep going, and then that's when they end up on the floor. They kind of slide out of their chair or wherever they're at.
Makes sense.
So introducing those things early and practicing with it, you know, working with a physical therapist, you know, a therapist who can come into the home, or an occupational therapist, well, you know, to help you use these devices are really important, because you want to make sure you're using it properly. Otherwise, you could potentially be causing the fall, if you don't know how to do it.
You said practicing. I'm sorry, it just reminded me of something. When I introduced you, or you were talking about something, you talked about, you know, as a nurse practicing, and it just hits something to me. It's funny because my dentist says that all the time. It's like, well, we're practicing. I'm like, I didn't want to hear that you're practicing, but
your physicians, everyone's practicing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always,
your lawyer, everybody, but but practicing how to use a walker, you know. And I'm thinking of my sister-in-law, who would probably make it a big fun game at Thanksgiving or something, you know, and see who could do it the best.
Who can get across the room as fast as they can with the walker. You know, I've seen some people using a cane where, you know, I asked them, I say, you know, hey, show me how you get around with your cane, because I want to see how they're getting around with it. And I had one lady, she was holding it was almost like a sword or like a staff, and she's just holding it in the air. You know, completely not using it at all, you know. And so that comes from, you know, not really practicing with it and almost not knowing what to do with it. Again, if we get to a certain point with someone who has memory problems, that's going to become an issue to then introduce it, because they're not there.
I don't know what it is.
And then now you have someone who has a fall risk, but we can't use that assistive device, so we have to figure out alternative methods to get them around safely.
Interesting. So obviously, to be aware of, you know, the internal things that are a risk factor, to be aware of the external things that are a risk factor, you know, that's not a quick process, but to me, it's got to be, you know, I mean, it's like a game changer. You either know it or you don't, because, you know, you said you don't want to be afraid of it, but you do want to be aware of what you're dealing with and what you're susceptible to and what to be on the watch for. But especially for all you adult children out there that are either actively caring for an aging loved one, or just monitoring them and trying to observe, you know, those are things that I think are really good markers, you know, kind of like, is there a bunch of bad food in the fridge? I mean, you know, it's just things that you can watch, and it really makes sense what you're saying. So,
little indicators, that we should look out for, and that's part of even what our caregivers do, especially
okay.
when loved ones live far away. You want someone watching out, because we get a lot of
Yeah.
calls, especially right around the holidays when kids come home and they say, Mom and Dad, they told me they were eating, and I looked in their fridge and there's nothing here that's good, or or it's pretty empty, and so you want to be proactive, and you want to watch out for your loved one, and not just asking them sometimes over the phone, how are things
'cause they're
going.
always
You want to
gonna tell you,
investigate.
you know.
It's always fine. We get a lot of people too who don't tell their kids that they fell,
That's right.
and
Oh, yeah.
they hide the
Tell
fall.
anybody.
Yeah, they don't want anyone to know,
That's
because
right.
that means that now things are
Yeah.
going to have to change.
Yeah.
And so you don't
Yeah.
want to hide that. If you feel wobbly, you want to talk to your doctor. You want to talk to your family about how you're feeling. If you're feeling scared, because again, that's where that social isolation comes from. That's where people start to become depressed. They're no longer going out and seeing their friends. They're no longer doing anything that they
Sure.
enjoy,
Yeah.
because of a fear of falling. Because of a fall. So
Yeah.
what can we do to prevent that? And that's where those strategies come into place. It's sort of, you've identified what are the risk factors of a fall. You understand the impact of what can result because of a fall. Now, what do I do? It's not going to be sort of, well, because it can happen now, that's it, I can't go anywhere.
Sure.
It's, what can we do
Yeah.
to make it to where you can enjoy life? And those are your golden years. And what, 80, when do they consider it platinum? And
I don't know. I don't
so
know.
you need to enjoy it. So enjoy that time.
That's good. So this is Debbie Singh, and we're talking about fall prevention and some great tips. She is with Visiting Angels, and we're going to take our last break and come right back and wrap it up. Hey, we're back real quick with Truth for Seniors, and we got just a few minutes, so we're going to jump right into it. And folks, before I forget, one of the things that Debbie has so graciously offered to all of our listeners is an opportunity to get this great book called Safe and Steady, and it is all about what we've been talking about. It's a fall prevention resource, and one of the coolest things is in the back, it has a home checklist, home safety checklist, and you've got things from the entrance, the kitchen, the bedrooms, the living room, halls and stairways, bathrooms, things to go through your house and look and see, hey, are you safe? Do you need to, shore something up here or there? But you've graciously offered this at no cost to anybody who wants it. So if you call their number, check them out on the web, whatever you can get the book and use it at no cost. And so we appreciate you doing that.
Oh, no problem. This is, I feel like keeping people fall free is something that I'm really passionate about, and I go to people's homes and I feel like I'm always preaching it. So if this is something that's going to help somebody stay safer at home longer, than it's very comprehensive, and it's little things, and so it's really handy. Feel free to give me a call, give our office a call anytime, and just ask for one, and we can get one out to you.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's areas to make easy home modifications. What can I do if I fall? How to get up from a fall? I mean, that's really great. So in the next couple minutes, what's the most important thing that we haven't discussed yet as far as fall prevention?
What are some things that you can do? One little thing to tell people: exercise, mobility.
Okay.
Try to, I always tell people, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so you want to try to incorporate daily stretches. It's simple things. If you have a chair, I tell people, if you have a chair and 2 cans at home, then you can do these exercises. You can sit in a chair and you do some range of motion, just whatever you can tolerate, and you just do it little by little. And even talking to your doctor, incorporating them into what you're wanting to do into your activity plan. Little stretches that you can do from side to side, just a few minutes. It's especially good if you do like a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening, and it just helps you maintain that flexibility and that mobility. Which again, if a fall were to occur, occur, you're probably going to recover from it a lot better, a little quicker, because you were a little bit more physically active and stronger. The other thing too is our diet. I always tell people you want to make sure that you're incorporating vitamin D and calcium into your diet for good bone health, because if the fall were to occur, because the reality is 1 in 3 falls to occur, and you're one of the, if you're that one that's going to fall, you want to be the one who doesn't get hurt. And so having good bone health, eating things that are rich in vitamin D and calcium. I do always give a little caveat for people with the green leafy vegetables, because they're really good for you. But if you're taking coumadin, warfarin, the green leafies are real high in vitamin K, and that's actually the antidote to coumadin and warfarin.
So it'll nullifying the effect.
So you want to talk to your doctor before you modify that diet right there. And so before you even modify your diet, you want to talk to your doctor and what medications you're taking, and make sure that it's on par with what you're doing. But just those little things like that, and again, staying active is going to be great. Using this checklist, training yourself too. I know we had actually previously touched on how to fall. You can actually train yourself on how to fall, and there are booklets on that too that teach you how to learn to relax when you're going to fall, because it's not our natural reaction to do that. When we take a tumble, we tense up, and that can actually cause more injury. So how can we prepare ourselves for if I were to fall? 'Cause sometimes you're going to fall. You're off balance, and you're going to keep going. You're not going to be able to catch yourself. And it's in that moment that you don't want to tell someone, no, relax.
There you go. Yeah, really. Yeah.
But
it's got to be impossible. Jeez.
Yeah, and so, but if you've kind of trained yourself for the what if, then you're more likely maybe to have a softer fall and kind of reduce that risk of having a serious injury related to it too.
So, is it safe to say, and I think I know the answer, but any questions, people should call you.
Give me a call.
And I imagine that you're willing to talk to anybody and everybody, even if they don't have an immediate need, to help be prepared, kind of plan ahead, put some things in order. Folks, this is, I think, one of the most, comprehensive and easy to understand booklets that I've ever seen, and packed with great information. I like what you guys put here: life care navigation. It's really it's really extensive, but so people should call you when.
They can actually call us anytime.
Okay.
So if they ever have any questions, feel free to call us. The number is there. You can ask for me. You can really talk to any of us there at our office. We're always eager to tell people about what we can do to make life better. Even my visits, it's free. I do a free in-home safety assessment.
Okay.
So when I come out, I can maybe point out some things that I think might make it a little bit safer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You did a great job.
This is great.
It's amazing how quick the time goes. And so we have to leave, but this is Truth for Seniors, and next up is Mike and Athena. So stay tuned. See you next week.